Everybody, welcome to the video. So my first look for week 17 of the NFL season over on DraftKings. So first look, first reaction to the pricing on the week 17 slate. We'll try our best to put a lineup together given the information that we have as of right now. But just know things are going to change drastically throughout the week. I think we've all come accustomed to that over the past couple months now with all the COVID news that drops, it seems like, each and every single day throughout the week. So just make sure you stay up to date and things will change. But that's why we have the updated videos throughout the week as well. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, got a official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Cheat sheets, optimizers, ownership projections, all that fun stuff. You know where to find it. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified. Just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 100 for the best contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you do sign over on Prize Picks, you can get a free money bonus as this deposit match up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think it'll be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. And we have a pretty big slate this week. Usually we've had around 9 to 11 games. Well, we have 14. There's no Thursday night game. No Saturday slate this week. Thankfully, I hate Saturday slates. And just one Sunday night game and one Monday night game. So we have a pretty big slate here. So lots of options to talk about. And there's a lot of good options, I would say, as well. Because, I mean, I like almost every single quarterback on this slate, it seems like. Like, up top, I don't have a problem with any of these guys. Josh Allen versus Atlanta, the only thing stopping me there would be the price and maybe a large spread. But if the Buffalo Bills happen to be blowing out the Falcons, I would say there's a decent chance that Josh Allen already got there anyway. Plus, he has that rushing floor, so I have no problem with Josh Allen. Patrick Mahomes versus Cincy. This game has a pretty high total. I could see it being very back and forth. The problem is it's very expensive if you want to stack them, because if you want to use Travis Kelce, he's expensive. If you want to use Tyreek Hill, he's expensive. All the Bengals are expensive, so it's a pretty hard stat to get to unless you find some value this weekend, which there certainly is, but it definitely is a tougher stack than normal, because the Bengals were usually like a cheaper stack besides Jamar Chase, but that is not the case this weekend. Tom Brady versus the Jets. I mean, I think you guys get the idea there. Only problem is Tom Brady, once again, without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, as Mike Evans got placed on the COVID reserve list. I had to look more into that, but I just got the news, and I mean, we'll see if he plays. I know he's still dealing with the injury, but I'm just going to assume as for right now that he's out again. But that could obviously change throughout the week. Kyler Murray versus Dallas. This is one of the best games of the week. Pretty tight spread for the most part, and they do have over a 50-point over-under, which not a lot of games can say that this week. Some are close, but I mean, this should be an exciting game to watch, although the Dallas defense is pretty brutal, but Kyler Murray has been running the ball recently, so it does give you a nice floor. Really hasn't been scoring many touchdowns, but that could obviously change soon. But no, DeAndre Hopkins definitely is a bit of a hit to him, but I think he'll be just fine. Only $7,300 with rushing upside. I think Kyler should definitely be on our radar. Matthew Stafford versus Baltimore. I know they're going to get some guys back defensively, but this is still not a great secondary. $7,100 going to pair him up with Cooper Kupp this weekend. I have no problem with that whatsoever. We'll see if Lamar Jackson's back or not. If he is playing, you could certainly play him at $7,000. Joe Burrow's in play versus KC, although that defense has definitely improved. Earlier in the year, yeah, we always played people against KC, but they've definitely gotten a lot better. Justin Herbert versus Denver. It's basically a price thing if you go with Justin Herbert. I know he played Denver recently, and he was cheap in that week. And I want to say he had a pretty solid game. Yeah, week 12 versus Denver. 28 for 44, had 24.7 fantasy points. I mean, it's a fine play. I just like the price point, really. It's not too hard to stack with Justin Herbert because you could always just throw Keenan Allen on there. Mike Williams will be out once again as he is unvaccinated, but I do like that price point on Herbert. Dak Prescott versus Arizona at $6,700. I think that's a fine play. Jalen Hurts, I think, is one of the better cash game quarterbacks. Only $6,600 facing Washington. Quarterbacks go off versus them each and every single week. You have that rushing upside. It was looking very bleak for Jalen Hurts early in the game last week versus the Giants, but ended up with 16.6 fantasy points to save his day. Wasn't a great game, but at $6,400, I mean, you're not really complaining too much. The big problem was only 2 carries for 7 yards, but they did end up absolutely blowing out the Giants. They really didn't do much late in the game, but this game's a little bit closer. Definitely think Jalen Hurts will have more rushing upside. And last time he faced Washington, which was just a couple weeks ago, 20 for 26, nearly 300 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns on 40 rushing yards. So I think Hurts definitely in play. And if you're playing cash games, he's very high on my list. Then after Hurts, we start to get to some guys where I'm really not that excited. Russell Wilson at $6,200 versus Detroit. You know, back in the day, if this was normal Russ, we're all over that. But this is not normal Russ. He's not been good for DFS in quite some time. Just looking at the game log for Russell Wilson recently, it's been awful. 16, 5, 21, which is not a terrible game versus Houston at that price. 17, 19, like, it's just not appealing to me. Like, I know he's cheap. I know he's facing Detroit, but it's just sad that I don't want to go there because that is so cheap for Russ in a great matchup. I mean, maybe in tournaments, you know, him and DK Metcalf or something, but I'm really not that high on Russell Wilson. Just the way Seattle operates their offense, it's really quite annoying. Taysom Hill's still on the COVID list. We'll see what happens to him. Pennell to at $1,500 is not the worst thing out there. But if I'm spending all the way down this week, like all the way down, we have an option because as for right now, Jimmy Garoppolo has a messed up right hand right now. He has a UCL tear and a fracture in his right thumb, which, trust me, I played quarterback before. You need your right thumb to throw the ball. So I am going to assume that Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to play this week. If that's the case, we have Trey Lance at $4,800 versus the Houston Texans. I know the Texans showed up versus the Chargers last week, but last time he played, he faced Arizona, not the worst defense out there by any means. It wasn't a great day through the air, but this was his first career start. But he ran the ball 16 times for nearly 90 yards. Didn't get to the end zone, didn't even score a touchdown, actually threw a pick in that game, but still had nearly 16 fantasy points. He's facing the Houston Texans now. Much softer matchup, $4,800. He didn't have George Kittle the last time he started as well, so if you're going to be DEEBO Samuel, George Kittle is my top options for a quarterback that's $4,800 that runs the ball a lot versus the Houston Texans playing at home. I would take that all day in cash games. You don't have to pair him up with anybody. You can certainly play him naked this week, but if you do want to pair him up, obviously DEEBO Samuel, George Kittle, your top options. You can mix in Brandon Ayuk as well. And we saw in week 4 when Trey Lance came in, he threw a 70-yard touchdown to DEEBO Samuel. So even though DEEBO had a pretty bad game his first week with Trey Lance, I don't think it's out of the question that they could hook up a couple of times. But if you're playing cash games this weekend and Jimmy Garoppolo is indeed out, Trey Lance is your guy for cash. Like, that's just way too cheap for a guy that runs the ball. I don't care if he doesn't have a great day through the air. If he's going to get me close to 100 rushing yards, even just 50 plus, I will take it because he's probably getting around 200 some yards through the air and hopefully a passing touchdown. So I like Trey Lance a lot if you're going more towards cash games this weekend. So we'll move on to the running back position. Typically, I usually pair him up with somebody, then run it back in these videos, but well, first off, there's barely any run back options on the Houston Texans anyway, unless you want to look at Nico Collins or Chris Conley or something like that. And the pass catching options, I wouldn't say are a must with Trey Lance. So moving on to running backs. Up top, we have Jonathan Taylor. You know he's going to get 100 plus yards, just a matter of if he scores a touchdown or not. It's a great matchup versus the Raiders. They're 7.5 point favorites at home. We'll see if he gets any of his linemen back, but I mean, the guy's just been a machine. No touchdowns last week, which has been the first time in quite some time, but he's still at 108 rushing yards. Didn't have any catches though, but I mean, I still like Jonathan Taylor. It was a tougher matchup versus the Cardinals anyway. Much softer spot here versus the Raiders. I think if you're spending up this week, it's just a question of do you want to play Jonathan Taylor or do you want to play Cooper Kupp versus Baltimore? Both are on $9,000 and both, I mean, the two best DFS plays pretty much each and every single week, and both guys find themselves in great matchups. So it's definitely a tough decision to be made if you do have the money to spend up this week. Austin Eckler, $8,200. He's off the COVID list, so he's going to be good to go. A little expensive though versus Denver, but he's always going to be in play. Probably better tournament play this weekend. But I'm actually going to scroll down a little bit. And David Montgomery is the first guy that really pops off the page to me. He's been getting a lot of usage recently. He's only $6,500, facing the Giants, who've been terrible versus the run. And he's getting a ton of opportunities recently, especially through the passing game, which is what kind of intrigues me the most. Looking back at week 12, 3 targets, but then 9, 7, 6, and 9 on the back of 17, 21, 10, 18, and 21 carries. Like, this is really good usage. And if he gets into the end zone, he's going to have a fantastic day versus the Giants, but I like him anyway. So $6,500, soft matchup at home. They're the favorites. Should give me 20 plus touches with a decent chunk in the passing game. I would take that all day at $6,500. And kind of sticking with this mid-range theme, if we can fit in Jonathan Taylor at the end, I'd feel pretty good about it, but I'm not going to force him in just yet. RASHAAD Penny at $6,100 I think is definitely interesting. Had a great game versus the Bears, who we just talked about. You got to keep in mind this game was in the snow, but he had 17 carries, 135 yards, got into the end zone. Not really using the passing game, which kind of sucks, so he's going to pretty much have to score a touchdown to make it work, because, I mean, yeah, even if he gets like 100 yards, that's fine, but we're talking like 13 points with the bonus, so we'd like him to get to the end zone, but he's facing Detroit, playing at home, their favorites. I think RASHAAD Penny should definitely be on our radar. Antonio Gibson at $5,900. Hasn't been very efficient recently, and that game versus Dallas was just brutal. We're lucky he scored a touchdown, but last time he faced Philly, week 15, 15 carries, 26 yards, got a touchdown, 18.5 fantasy points. They get hurt in that game. Got to keep in mind, but had 7 targets as well, so someone to keep your eye on. Then after that, I'm not really seeing anything I love down low. We'll have to see what James Conner's status is throughout the week, because Chase Edmonds, we know, just took on a monster role and was really, really good for the Cardinals on Saturday versus the Indianapolis Colts. But a guy I like a lot, once again, is Ronald Jones. His price did come up $1,200, but the usage was really good for him versus Carolina. Had 20 carries, 65 yards. It wasn't like really efficient or anything, only 3.3 yards per carry, but also had 3 targets and 16-point fantasy points to get into the end zone, and the Jets are just bleeding points to running backs. This is a favorable setup for the Buccaneers. So I like Ronald Jones once again. And Leonard Fournette, probably no 2 top receiving options once again. So ball's going to go somewhere. I do like Ronald Jones a lot at $6,300, even with the price increase. Because he was just way too cheap last week. I think this is probably a better price point for Ronald Jones. And honestly, I think he could be a little bit more expensive versus the Jets, and I'd still have some interest. So at this point, we have a lot of cheap players. Trey Lance, David Montgomery, and Ronald Jones. So we have just under $5,500 left. You got to keep in mind, we have a cheap tight end probably and a cheap defense. So we can pretty much probably plug whoever the heck we want. I would love to get Cooper Kupp in. DEEBO Samuel is obviously an option since we have Trey Lance. He's just been unstoppable recently. I finally got used in the passing game once again versus Tennessee. Although, don't forget, that's with Jimmy Garoppolo, but had 11 targets, 9 catches, which is a lot better than the usage we saw for that 3-week span where only had 1 catch. Like, DEEBO Samuel is too good of a wide receiver to not be using him in the passing game. Yes, I know he's been pretty solid at running back. He's going to get you a handful of carries more than likely, although Trey Lance at quarterback could maybe take away from that because Jimmy Garoppolo is not running the ball 10-plus times. So it's also something to keep in consideration. But DEEBO has just been a freak, and facing Houston, I don't really think they have anybody that can stop him. Tyreek Hill versus Cincy's fine if you're stacking that game up. Stephon Diggs versus Atlanta, Jamar Chase, again, if you're stacking it up. Keenan now with no Mike Williams. Didn't really seem to help him last week, but the target's going to be funneled his way, and I assume he will bounce back. But instead of going just straight down the list here, I'm going to skip to probably my favorite play wide receiver once again. He was on the core plays last week, and he's going to be there probably once again, assuming Mike Evans is out. But we have Antonio Brown, $6,100. The price did come up. He was at only $4,900 last week. He was very chalky, but rightfully so. But he gets targets each and every single week, even with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans playing. You take them off the field. That led to 15 targets, his highest of the season last week versus the Carolina Panthers. 3.1 fantasy points. An overall great day for Antonio Brown. I know the price did come up, but I still think he's a fantastic play at this price. He should probably be around $7,000. Like, honestly, if I knew Antonio Brown was going to be the only wide receiver of the big 3 available versus the Jets, he should be around $8,000. He's $6,100. He is still a fantastic value. So we're going to plug him in once again, and I will feel very, very good about it. Yes, we're doubling up with the Buccaneers once again, but I did it last week. Was totally fine. It worked out, and I think it worked out once again as they are facing the Jets, and they have one of the highest implied team totals on the entire slate. So not that we're really burning through money quick here, but we are going to have to find some value. And with the news that Mike Williams is going to be out once again this week, that leads us right back to Joshua Palmer. I mean, he pretty much plays all the snaps with no Mike Williams. $4,000 if I remember correctly, but we have to scroll all the way down to find him. But pretty sure he's, $3,600 for Joshua Palmer. I know it's the Denver Broncos. I wouldn't say it's the softest matchup out there, but last week versus Houston, played the majority of the snaps, got a touchdown very late in the game. It was a garbage time touchdown, but he still has 6 targets, 43 yards. I think he'll be productive. I mean, facing the Giants, 7 targets, 5 catches. That was with no Keenan Allen. I think Palmer's just a fine play here. So I'm going to plug him in, $3,600. Opens up some value. Again, not my favorite matchup, but just cheap exposure to a Justin Herbert pass catcher with Mike Williams out sounds pretty good to me. And it does open up some salary for us. Now we're closer to $6,000 left, which, like I said, I'm trying to be able to fit in a Cooper Kupp or Jonathan Taylor at the end here. So I think we're setting ourselves up quite nicely to do so, because you got to keep in mind, we can get one of these cheaper defenses in or tight ends. And we'll actually hit the defense now just to know what kind of money we're working with. And the first thing I always do is scroll all the way down looking at defense and find the first viable one. The problem is I am not seeing any I like here. Like the Falcons versus Josh Allen, no thank you. Jets versus Buccaneers, I already have $2, so that makes no sense. Lions versus Seattle, maybe, but I don't really want to go that route. Jaguars versus New England. I'm not liking any of these, to be honest. But I know in the 3K range, you do have a couple of decent defense, like the Seahawks versus Detroit. The Bears versus the Giants might be my favorite option. Their offense is just so bad right now. We have David Montgomery, so it actually is fine correlation-wise. So I actually might just plug in the Bears. A little bit expensive for me for cash games, but I have done it a couple times this year. The spot's right, and I think the Bears versus the Giants. And since we have David Montgomery, it's fine. $6,500 left. Throw in cheap tight end, mid-range wide receiver. We should be able to fit in a Taylor or a Kupp in the flex. Hopefully. At least that's the plan too. So now that we have $6,500 left, we will look for a mid-range wide receiver right now. And there was a couple I liked, mentioning them earlier. I don't think we can afford we could afford one of these guys, but it might take away from the plan I have in the flex spot. So I'm going to dip a little bit lower, look at this 6K range. You guys like Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf versus Detroit. That looks fine to me. Devonta Smith if you are using Jalen Hurts. Terry McLaurin's been a bit of a ride this year. I don't think I feel very comfortable going that route. But Jalen Waddle just stand out to me. Facing Tennessee, been one of the worst teams in the league versus wide receivers this year. And he's just getting a boatload of targets. Like, the guy's, he looks good when he's on the field. Tua loves him. If he's going to give me around 10 targets versus Tennessee, I'll take it. 31, 18, 25, 20 points the past 4 weeks. I think it's a good spot. A little bit expensive, close to $7,000. Typically, he's a lot cheaper than that, but we're just going to plug him in and chase the targets. And I think we can afford him. If we have to drop down from Jalen Waddle, I'll do it. I don't think it's a big deal. So at this point, we have $6,400 left per player. And if you just kind of factor in putting in one of a 3K tight end, that would leave you around $3,000 left. So we're going to have to be in this 3K range. Obviously, if you want to spend up, Mark Andrews has been a beast. Travis Kelce versus Cincy. I'm assuming he'll be back this weekend. I think that's fine. George Kittle could be your pairing option with Trey Lance. That's fine. Gronkowski without the pass catching options again, facing the Jets. I think he'll be in line for a good game. Didn't do anything last week versus the Panthers, but this is definitely a much softer matchup. And obviously, all these guys are fine plays. Gesicki versus Tennessee, Schultz versus the Cardinals. But like I said, we're going to scroll down a little bit. And the guys that stand out to me the most, Jared Cook, Foster Moreau if Darren Waller happened to be out because the Colts are just really, really bad versus tight ends. But Cole Kmet, CJ Uzomah, these guys are kind of the ones standing out the most to me. We already have 2 Bears, but I wouldn't mind getting another one in there. Like, the Giants don't scare me defensively. CJ Uzomah, though, if you just want a cheap piece of that KC game, maybe we'll just try to go CJ Uzomah. He'll probably get a handful of targets. He's probably got the score to be viable, but it's fine. If we go that route, we have $9,500 left, which actually does leave us with either Cooper Kupp or Jonathan Taylor. So I'll let you guys use your imagination, whichever one you like the most. I mean, they're basically the same play in my opinion. Jonathan Taylor is by far the best running back play. Cooper Kupp by far the best wide receiver play. I mean, I typically feel better with 3 running backs in cash game builds. If you were going more of a tournament build, I mean, you could go with Cooper Kupp, but they're the exact same play in my opinion. If you wanted to put in Cooper Kupp for Jalen Waddle and use another 6K some running back, that would be fine to me too, but you guys can throw whoever you want in. I don't think it's a bad looking first look. You have Trey Lance, no run back options or pairing options, but I think that's fine because of his rushing upside. David Montgomery, Rojo, the running back slots, Antonio Brown, Joshua Palmer, and Jalen Waddle, wide receiver. CJ Uzomah at tight end. If you wanted to play Cole Kmet, you could. You'd be pigeonholed into Jonathan Taylor, but if there's anything wrong with Jonathan Taylor, flex spot we left open for one of those 2. Then we have the Bears defense. That's not a bad first look. A lot of options this week, so it should be a fun one. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I'm excited to see how the news unfolds this week because I'm sure we're going to get thrown a lot of curveballs that we weren't expecting. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to become an official member over on Patreon, you know where to find it. Link can be found down below. And don't forget this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. And as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. I think that'll be it. I will stop rambling, and I wish you guys a great start to the week.